Imagine you are walking into this massive ancient courtroom.
Right, a really intimidating, heavy space.
Exactly. The judge is seated way up high, and the charges being read are they're so severe, so sweeping.
It's not just a minor infraction.
No, not at all. The penalty isn't a fine or, a prison sentence for the defendant. The penalty is the complete and utter demolition of an entire city.
Wow. Total destruction.
Yeah, every structure, every system, every bit of wealth you have ever known just slated to be swept away. It is terrifying.
Absolute cosmic dread, really.
Right. But then, right at the climax of the sentencing, something completely unthinkable happens.
The twist.
Yeah, the twist. The judge takes off the heavy robes, steps down from the towering bench, and walks right over to the defendant.
And you'd think this is the moment of execution.
You would. But instead of striking the defendant down, the judge wraps them in this joyous, tearful embrace and actually begins to sing over them.
It's such a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. That absolute whiplash from the dread of cosmic annihilation to the most intimate, exuberant display of divine affection imaginable. That's the exact journey we are taking you on today.
It's quite a ride.
So we're venturing into a text that is surprisingly compact, but just immensely powerful. The Book of Zephaniah.
Or a book people often just, flip right past.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to dive deep into a rigorous theological survey of this ancient minor prophet by Chris R. Velasquez.
Which is a fantastic, dense source.
It is. And we are extracting the most startling, relevant insights from it. We're going to explore the history, the physical archaeology, and the sheer emotional weight of its message.
And, the tendency to overlook this text just because of its brevity, it's a massive mistake.
Oh, totally. Why is that?
Well, functionally, Zephaniah acts as the ultimate bridge in the canonical storyline of the Hebrew Bible.
The connective tissue? Sort of.
Exactly. It takes the darkest, most terrifying warnings of covenant judgment and links them directly to the brightest, most radiant hope of post-exilic restoration.
So it spans the whole spectrum.
Yeah, and the architecture of the book is literally designed to pull you through that exact progression.
How does Velasquez break that structure down?
So he points out a three-part macrostructure. It opens with this terrifying pronouncement of judgment on Judah and Jerusalem locally.
Right, starting at home.
Yeah. Then that judgment doesn't just stay local. It expands outward to encompass all the surrounding nations, which creates this universal global horizon.
Like a shockwave.
Exactly like a shockwave. And finally, it pivots to an incredible vision of restored hope, purification, and rejoicing.
But you can't just skip to the happy ending, right?
No, you absolutely cannot get to the singing God at the end without walking through the crumbling, chaotic world that necessitated this drastic message in the first place.
Right, which brings us to the actual historical context. To understand that chaos, we have to set the historical clock, right?
Right. Yeah, we have to figure out the mechanics of the world Zephaniah is standing in.
So we're in the late 7th century BCE, roughly between 640 and 609 BCE. King Josiah is sitting on the throne of Judah.
Which is a really turbulent time globally.
Insanely turbulent. The geopolitical tectonic plates are just shifting violently.
Yeah.
The terrifying Assyrian Empire, which, they've essentially been the apex predator of the ancient Near East for a century. They're starting to show serious cracks.
They're definitely weakening, stretching too thin.
Yeah, and a new imperial bully, Babylon, is beginning its rise to power. So how does a vassal society like Judah actually behave when the global superpower that has terrorized them for decades suddenly starts to falter?
It's a great question. It creates a massive, terrifying vacuum of power.
Just total instability.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how that macro-level imperial anxiety trickles down into the micro-level of everyday life and commerce.
Like, how does it affect the average Judean?
Well, when an empire that has held you under its thumb via sheer military terror and heavy tribute starts to weaken, a vassal state doesn't necessarily feel relief.
They don't. You'd think they'd be celebrating.
No, they feel profound panic. The tribute system under Assyria was designed to keep vassal states perpetually on the brink of economic collapse so they couldn't fund a rebellion.
Ah, so Judah was basically broke.
Hollowed out financially to pay off Nineveh, yeah. So when Nineveh starts to wobble, the Judean court is thrown into a frantic diplomatic scramble.
Trying to figure out who to side with.
Right. Do they rebel and stop paying tribute? Do they align with Egypt, the other fading superpower, for protection? Or do they try to appease the rising Babylonians?
It's a geopolitical minefield.
It really is. And the specific historical horizon of Zephaniah is dominated by this impending fall of the Assyrian capital, Nineveh.
Which hadn't happened yet when he was speaking.
Right. In Zephaniah's time, this fall, which happens historically in 612 BCE, is still in the future. He is actively predicting it.
So he's looking at the geopolitical landscape and seeing the writing on the wall.
Yes. And the warning is that just because your primary oppressor is going down, it does not mean your society is suddenly safe from the consequences of its own systemic rot.
Wow. And here's where it gets really interesting. The source material grounds this ancient anxiety in undeniable physical reality.
We aren't just talking about abstract poetry here.
No, not at all. We're not just analyzing metaphorical destruction. The Vlasis survey highlights the actual Nineveh destruction layers.
The physical evidence.
Yeah, in modern-day Mosul, Iraq, archaeologists have excavated the ruins of Nineveh and found these thick, undeniable layers of ash.
Smashed pottery, ruined architecture.
Exactly. It's the physical residue of a catastrophic military siege. It corroborates the city's violent fall in 612 BCE by a coalition of Babylonians and Medes.
Just as Zephaniah predicted in chapter 2.
Right. Verses 13 through 15, where he says, Nineveh will be turned into a dry, absolute desolation. We are talking about ash layers that tell the story of a city burning so hot and collapsing so fast that the imperial records were just buried in the rubble.
It's chilling. That physical evidence forces us to read the text not as some detached religious theory, but as historical trauma.
Real people, real panic.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the survey also brings up the Lachish letters to illustrate the desperation of this era.
Oh, the Lachish letters are fascinating.
They really are. Now, while these letters date to a slightly later period, the early 6th century BCE, during the Babylonian advance, they perfectly illustrate the social and military mechanics of the world Zephaniah is addressing.
How so? What exactly are these letters?
Well, these letters are ostraca. In the ancient world, when you are under siege, your supply lines are cut, you run out of papyrus.
You literally run out of paper.
Exactly. You run out of proper writing materials entirely. So military commanders are writing their desperate final dispatches on broken pieces of pottery ostraca using this fading ink.
That paints such a vivid picture.
It does. The Lachish letters show a Judean military outpost watching the signal fires of neighboring cities go out one by one.
Just waiting for their turn to fall.
Yes. They reveal a society dealing with profound military distress, a collapsed economy, and the sheer panic of an empire bearing down on a vastly outmatched populace.
I mean, imagine the visceral terror of a military commander writing his final update on a piece of trash, a broken jar, because the logistics of his entire nation have just evaporated.
It's the ultimate vulnerability of a small state caught in the gears of ancient empires.
And Zephaniah uses this kind of recent imperial trauma as a rhetorical weapon, right? The survey mentions another confirmed archaeological event, the sack of Thebes.
Right, also known as Noemen in 663 BCE.
Yeah. The Assyrians marched down and completely dismantled this great, wealthy, seemingly invincible Egyptian city. And Zephaniah points to that specific historical event to shatter Judah's illusion of invulnerability.
He's basically saying, look at the headlines.
Exactly. He is looking at his own people and saying, you saw what happened to Thebes. The most heavily fortified city in the south was reduced to rubble. What makes you think the walls of Jerusalem make you untouchable?
It is a brutal reality check, and it's aimed at a society that had become incredibly arrogant despite its vulnerability.
Where is that arrogance coming from? Just the walls?
No, the arrogance wasn't just a matter of foreign policy or military defense. It was deeply rooted in systemic internal corruption.
The rot from within.
Right. If you look at the mechanics of late monarchic Jerusalem, it functioned as a royal city where the institutions of power were completely intertwined.
Like a massive network.
Exactly. The survey notes that while the basic social unit was the patriarchal family, Zephaniah's target is public covenant life. Patronage, wealth, and legal authority were entirely concentrated in the hands of Jerusalem's urban elites.
So the rich were just hoarding everything.
Yeah, you have to understand the mechanism of this agrarian economy. Wealth is generated in the countryside by farmers, right?
Sure, they're the ones growing the food.
But that wealth is extracted by the urban center through taxes, debt slavery, and rigged legal courts.
So the system is entirely rigged against the vulnerable.
Totally rigged. The elites in Jerusalem are exploiting the rural populations, funneling that wealth into the capital, and then using the religious institutions, the temple system, to legitimize their corruption.
I mean, it operates exactly like a massive modern corporate monopoly.
How do you mean?
Like, imagine a monopoly that also happens to control the regulatory government agencies and the major media outlets simultaneously.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
If the board of directors at the very top is corrupt, they can use the media to cover it up and the government to make their corruption legally binding.
So there's no checks and balances.
None. You cannot just fix one department. The poison is systemic. The entire mechanism of justice is broken.
And this systemic rot, this interconnected web of political and religious exploitation, is exactly what triggers the cosmic lawsuit that Zephaniah files against his own people.
Right. Let's talk about that cosmic lawsuit.
The concept of a covenant lawsuit is central to understanding the prophetic tradition.
It's like God taking them to court.
Exactly. Zephaniah is essentially acting as a prosecuting attorney on behalf of God, filing formal charges against Judah for breach of contract.
And the charges in chapter 1, they strike at the very heart of their religious identity, don't they?
They do. The text explicitly calls out the worship of Baal, the worship of Milcom, and the veneration of the starry host, the celestial bodies.
Okay, but wait, let me push back on this idolatry charge for a second, just from a historical perspective.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at the geopolitical reality you just described, wasn't this syncretism essentially a treaty obligation?
You mean adopting foreign gods to appease the empires?
Yeah. Judah was a vassal to Assyria. In the ancient Near East, vassal treaties often required the subservient nation to place the gods of the suzerain, the conquering empire, into their own temples, right?
Yes, as a sign of political submission.
So, if Judah stopped worshiping the Assyrian astral deities, they were effectively declaring political rebellion and inviting a military slaughter.
That's the political logic, yes.
So isn't Zephaniah demanding that Judah commit national suicide just to maintain religious purity? Weren't the Judeans just hedging their bets to survive?
That is precisely the political justification the Judean royal court would have used. They absolutely viewed syncretism as pragmatic diplomacy.
It's just survival.
Right. But what's fascinating here is how the covenant fundamentally rejects that pragmatism. The core issue of the Sinai covenant is exclusivity.
Meaning God doesn't share.
Exactly. God's relationship with Israel is framed not as a political treaty, but as a marriage.
Oh, that completely changes the dynamic.
It does. This wasn't abstract paganism happening in some remote forest. This was covenant infidelity happening directly inside Judah's own religious institutions.
So they were trying to have it both ways.
Yes. The people were blending allegiances. They were participating in the worship of YHWH, maintaining the temple sacrifices, but then simultaneously turning around and swearing oaths by Milcom, an Ammonite deity.
Or bowing to the stars on their rooftops.
Right, to appease Assyrian political pressure. The mechanism of syncretism isn't the total abandonment of God. It's the demotion of God to just one deity among many in a crowded pantheon.
So God is just one tool in their diplomatic toolbox.
Precisely. And Zephaniah is dismantling the idea that you can compartmentalize your allegiances like that. In the logic of the covenant, a compromised, pragmatic allegiance is viewed as total betrayal.
I see. It is the equivalent of telling a spouse, hey, I'm remaining completely faithful to you, but I've also signed a legal contract to be married to our wealthy neighbor because it secures our mortgage.
Right. The pragmatism completely violates the nature of the relationship.
Because of this profound institutionalized infidelity, Zephaniah introduces what is arguably the most terrifying phrase in the entire Hebrew Bible.
The Yom YHWH.
Yes, the day of the Lord.
And Yom YHWH is this massive theological concept, and it has a very specific historical evolution in the text.
What did it originally mean to the people?
Well, originally, in popular Israelite theology, the day of the Lord was a day of nationalistic triumph.
Like a victory parade.
Exactly. The assumption was that God would eventually step into history, crush all of Israel's foreign enemies, and vindicate his chosen people. It was a very comforting thought.
A day to look forward to.
Right. But prophets like Amos, and now Zephaniah, they take that popular expectation and completely invert it.
They flip it on its head.
Yes. The day of the Lord is no longer a day of rescue for Israel. It is a day of reckoning for Israel.
And the language Zephaniah uses to describe this day in chapter 1 is genuinely shocking.
It's apocalyptic almost.
Yeah. It goes far beyond a localized military defeat. God declares he will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth. He lists humans, animals, birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea.
Notice the order of that list.
Yeah, the sequence is a direct reversal of the creation account in Genesis 1.
Exactly. The mechanism of judgment here is a cosmic decreation.
It's not just a foreign army breaching the walls of Jerusalem. It is the Creator hitting the cosmic reset button.
The fabric of reality is being unstitched because human sin has fractured the entire created order.
That is heavy.
It is. The decreation motif serves to show that covenant judgment is nested inside universal judgment. The breaking of the moral law has ontological consequences for the physical world.
And Zephaniah heightens this terror by utilizing incredibly ironic and frankly chilling liturgical imagery, right?
Yes, the temple imagery. In chapter 1, verse 7, there is a command for silence before the Lord.
Like a hush falling over a crowd.
Exactly. It is a terrifying liturgical hush. God has prepared a sacrifice, and he has consecrated his guests.
To understand the horror of that, you have to understand how the sacrificial system normally functions in ancient Israel.
Right, which is based on substitution.
Yeah. A sacrifice is a mechanism of substitution. If you commit an offense, you bring an unblemished animal to the temple. The animal absorbs the violence of the judgment.
It takes a penalty.
Right. The sacrifice takes the hit so the human offerer can be cleansed and walk away free.
Exactly. The ritual absorbs the violence. But Zephaniah subverts that entire mechanism.
How so?
The horrific irony in chapter 1 is that the people of Judah are not the ones bringing the sacrifice to be saved. The Lord has consecrated the wicked as the victims of his judgment.
Oh, wow. They are the sacrifice.
Yes, the divine violence they thought they were ritually managing at the temple is now turned directly inward upon them.
That is terrifying.
It really is. The very system they thought guaranteed their security has become the theater of their destruction. The very ritual intended to save them is weaponized against them.
And the text points very specific fingers at who is going to face this judgment, doesn't it?
It's very targeted.
Yeah, it targets the officials, the merchants, and the complacent householders. It targets the people who operate the economic machinery of the city.
The ones who have benefited most from the corruption.
Right, the ones who believe their accumulated capital, their silver and gold, can insulate them from the consequences of their moral failures.
And the Velocys survey delves deeply into the psychological state of these targeted elites. It highlights the concept of complacency.
Complacency in the face of all this geopolitical chaos.
Yeah. These are people who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do ill.
So they don't think God is relevant.
Exactly. They haven't become atheists. They have become practical deists. They have reduced God to an absentee landlord who is completely disconnected from the socioeconomic realities of their city.
So he's just a concept to them, not an active judge.
Right. And in analyzing this, the text points out the crucial Hebrew word korb, which translates to near.
Near, like chronologically.
Yes. The defining terror of the day of the Lord is its absolute nearness. It is imminent.
It's right at the door.
Exactly. It is a military and divine judgment that is so close, so immediately impending, that all the wealth accumulated through generations of exploitation is rendered instantly and entirely powerless.
It completely shatters the illusion of security.
Your money can't save you from a cosmic reset.
You can build the most robust bank account, you can construct fortified walls around your estate, you can bribe the local judges, but when the cosmic order is being reversed and a foreign army is at the gates, your silver and gold have zero purchasing power.
Exactly zero.
But the indictment doesn't stop with the wealthy merchants in the suburbs, right? The lawsuit moves to the highest seats of power.
It goes right to the top.
Because this localized corruption in Jerusalem's upper class wasn't happening in a vacuum. Which brings us to the devastating woe to Jerusalem in chapter 3.
And the breadth of the institutional indictment in chapter 3 is just staggering.
He spares absolutely no one.
No, he systematically dismantles every pillar of Judean society. He lists the corrupt actors meticulously, identifying 4 distinct classes of leadership.
Let's list them out.
You have the princes, which are the secular rulers. You have the judges, the prophets, and the priests.
I mean, imagine waking up today to a news alert revealing a scandal of such magnitude that it simultaneously indicts the entire Supreme Court, the most prominent national religious figures, the heads of the Federal Reserve, and the executive branch.
All at the exact same time.
Yes, that is the level of systemic collapse Zephaniah is describing. And he uses these sharp, violent metaphors for these leaders.
Very predatory language.
Exactly. The princes are described as roaring lions, and the judges as evening wolves.
Which is very evocative for an agrarian society.
Let's look at the mechanics of those metaphors. A roaring lion uses pure, terrifying force to seize what it wants.
Right, it doesn't hide, it just takes.
Yeah, that represents the secular rulers using military and political force to seize property and consolidate wealth in broad daylight.
And the evening wolves.
An evening wolf is a nocturnal predator that leaves nothing but bones for the morning. That is the judicial system.
The judges who work in the shadows.
Exactly. Judges are supposed to impartially weigh the law, but instead they are taking bribes and perverting justice so thoroughly that by the time the trial is over, the vulnerable have been stripped to the bone.
That's a brutal image. And the religious leaders are equally complicit.
They aren't pushing back against the corruption.
Not at all. The prophets, who are supposed to speak truth to power, are described as reckless and treacherous.
So they're just covering for the politicians.
Essentially, yes. They are yes men providing divine endorsement for the corrupt policies of the princes.
And the priests.
The priests, whose entire job is to mediate God's holiness and maintain the purity of the sanctuary, are accused of profaning the holy and doing violence to the Torah.
Violence to the Torah, that's a strong phrase.
It means they twist the legal rulings to accommodate the elite. Every single institution designed to uphold justice and mediate God's presence has been weaponized for economic exploitation and deception.
This complete failure of leadership brings up a crucial theological mechanism from the survey. The principle of accountability.
Yes, which is so important here.
Privilege does not grant immunity. Privilege exponentially increases accountability.
And that is the core error of Jerusalem's elite. They assume that because they possess the physical temple, because they are the geographical center of the Davidic covenant, they possess a blank check.
They think they're untouchable.
They have mistaken divine election for divine immunity. And Zephaniah destroys that assumption entirely.
Being chosen doesn't mean you get a free pass.
Exactly. Being the covenant people doesn't mean you are spared from judgment when you adopt the oppressive practices of the surrounding nations. It means you are judged by a vastly higher standard because you are publicly bearing the name of YHWH.
This raises an important historical question, one that really challenges the efficacy of religious reform.
Okay, let's hear it.
We established earlier that Zephaniah is prophesying during the reign of King Josiah.
Yes, the late 7th century.
Right. If you track the historical timeline in the Book of Kings, Josiah actually led massive sweeping religious reforms around 622 BCE.
He was known as a great reformer.
Yeah, he systematically tore down the idols, he executed corrupt priests, he centralized worship, and he repaired the temple. So looking at Zephaniah's sweeping indictment of a totally corrupt state, does this mean Josiah's massive reforms were just an objective failure?
That is a brilliant historical tension to introduce.
Because it seems like a contradiction.
It does. The Velocys survey navigates this by suggesting that Zephaniah likely delivered these prophecies before the absolute peak of Josiah's reforms.
Okay, so maybe things got a little better after he preached.
Perhaps externally, yes. However, the theological synthesis we can draw is profound regarding the actual mechanics of reform. Josiah possessed genuine reforming zeal, and the institutional changes definitely happened.
But Zephaniah is saying it wasn't enough.
Right. Zephaniah's indictment shows us that external top-down institutional reform is never sufficient on its own.
I think of it like a massive corporation that gets caught in a devastating human rights scandal.
Right, a PR nightmare.
Exactly. And to save face, the CEO mandates a complete corporate rebranding. They change the logo, they publish a new ethics charter, they fire a few mid-level managers, and they redesign the corporate headquarters.
So externally, everything looks shiny and new.
Yes. Externally, the company looks completely reformed. But the board of directors is still secretly embezzling funds and utilizing the exact same exploitative supply chains in the background.
The core is still rotten.
Yeah, the external branding changed, but the internal financial mechanics, the heart of the company, remain completely corrupt.
That analogy captures the dynamic perfectly. Josiah could smash the physical stone altars of Baal, and he could mandate new bureaucratic policies for temple worship.
But he couldn't change the people.
Exactly. He could not legislate the internal posture of the people. Without durable, heart-level covenant faithfulness from the populace, the systemic rot just retreats, adapts, and finds a new institutional place to hide.
It just goes underground.
Right. National judgment wasn't ultimately prevented by Josiah's reforms because the internal moral architecture of the society hadn't truly transformed.
Wow. And this judgment, this demand for profound moral alignment, is not restricted to Judah, is it?
No, the geopolitical rot extended outward.
Which is why Zephaniah's gaze naturally shifts from the corrupt local judges to the surrounding empires.
It becomes a universal lawsuit.
God puts the entire known world on notice, effectively boxing the compass of the ancient Near East.
It covers all directions.
Yeah, he points to Philistia on the Mediterranean coast to the west. He targets Moab and Ammon across the Jordan River to the east. He looks far south to Cush, which represents the ancient Nubian or Ethiopian powers.
And then the big one.
Right. Finally, he turns north and east to address the great terrifying imperial power of Assyria and its capital, Nineveh.
And these nations are not just pulled out of a hat randomly.
They aren't just local rivals.
Well, they are, but they represent the total geographical breadth of God's universal sovereignty.
On the four corners of the map.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates an incredible theological truth about divine justice. God judges massive, arrogant empires with the exact same authority and ease with which he judges his own covenant people.
So no one is above the law.
No nation, no matter its military prowess or economic dominance, is morally beyond divine evaluation.
And he's very specific about their crimes, too.
Yes. Moab and Ammon are indicted for their territorial pride and their mockery of displaced people.
Kicking people when they're down.
Right. And Assyria is indicted for its sheer imperial arrogance, for believing its own propaganda that it was the eternal center of the world.
You know, the atmosphere created by this sequence is almost vertigo-inducing.
It's overwhelming.
It is. You are hit with sweeping cosmic decreation, the exposure of deep systemic corruption among Judah's elite leaders, the impending destruction of all the surrounding nations, and the absolute collapse of the greatest empire on earth.
It feels like there's nowhere to hide.
Exactly. With the entire known world placed under this dark, heavy, inescapable cloud of universal judgment, you are left looking for an exit. You wonder, is there any way out of this mechanism of destruction?
Is there any hope at all?
Yeah. Is there a political or economic bunker deep enough to survive the unraveling of the world?
Well, just when the tension reaches its absolute breaking point, when the listener is overwhelmed by the inescapable nature of the judgment, Zephaniah executes this brilliant, almost jarring rhetorical pivot.
It happens in chapter 2, right?
Yes. The camera zooms in tight on Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and the tone shifts entirely.
We go from the cosmic, booming voice of destruction to an urgent, frantic, almost pleading call.
Like a lifeline being thrown out.
Yeah. He says, "Gather together, yes, gather, O shameless nation, before the decree takes effect. Seek the Lord, all you humble of the land."
It functions like an oasis in the middle of a burning desert. It is one of the clearest, most urgent offers of mercy in the entire prophetic tradition.
And he directs this call to a very specific socioeconomic and spiritual demographic, the humble of the land.
Or, in the Hebrew, the Noam.
So, what does this all mean? Who are the Noam?
It's a crucial term to understand.
Is this just an ancient checklist for self-salvation? Is God saying, hey, if you perform these 3 acts of religious modesty, you earn an exemption card from the cosmic destruction?
Not at all. The Velasquez survey makes a crucial distinction here. This is profoundly not a formula for self-salvation.
Then what is it?
To understand the Noam, you have to look at the socio-economic reality of ancient Judah that we talked about earlier. The humble of the land were often the literal agrarian poor.
The ones being exploited by the evening wolves.
Exactly. The disenfranchised class who had been stripped of their ancestral lands by the roaring lions and evening wolves. They had no economic leverage, no political power, and no ability to bribe the judges.
They were totally marginalized.
Yes. And theologically, they represent those who recognize this total lack of leverage before God. They are not automatically exempt from the military siege just because they check a religious box.
Because they live in the same city as the corrupt leaders.
Exactly. They live in the exact same geographical blast radius. But humility and repentance, captured in the Hebrew concept of ub, which means a fundamental turning back.
Shub, turning back to God.
Yes, that represents the necessary internal posture of those whom God might shelter.
So it's about their posture, not their resume.
Right.
It is the difference between a wealthy merchant trying to outrun an F5 Tornado in his sports car because he believes his high-end engine and driving skills can beat the storm.
That's the arrogance of wealth.
Yeah. Versus a farmer who realizes his absolute physical helplessness, looks at the sky, and immediately runs down into the storm cellar.
That's a great way to put it.
The farmer isn't saved because he is morally superior to the merchant. He is saved because he correctly assessed his vulnerability and sought refuge in the only place that could withstand the violence.
That illustrates the mechanism perfectly. And this introduces a massive theological framework that echoes throughout the rest of the biblical canon. Remnant theology.
Remnant theology. The shuret, right?
Yes, the Hebrew term is shuret. The defining characteristic of the save this remnant is not their flawless moral perfection.
Because nobody's perfect.
Right. It is their willingness to execute that shub, that turning. It is their raw recognition that human constructs cannot save them.
They abandon the illusions.
Yes. They seek refuge in the character of God rather than in their accumulated wealth, their desperate military alliances with Egypt, or their social status in Jerusalem.
True hope in this ancient text is completely divorced from cultural power.
Totally divorced.
It isn't found in being part of the ruling majority. It isn't found in having the right political connections to the royal court or, a massive accumulation of silver from manipulating the agrarian markets.
None of that matters in the end.
Right. It is found in a quiet, radical reliance on God's mercy. It requires letting go of your pride, looking at the impending collapse of your society, and saying, I have absolutely nothing else.
And it is precisely that posture of humility, the posture of the Noam, that prepares them for the third and final movement of the book.
The restoration.
Yes. The remnant has been refined, they have survived the dark corridor of judgment, and now they are positioned to receive the restoration.
Because it is this very remnant, these humble few who have weathered the storm, who get to witness the most shocking plot twist in the prophetic tradition.
The climax of the text.
Exactly. We'll move into chapter 3, verses 9 through 20, and the text uses a tiny hinge word in verse 9. Then.
Just one word shifts everything.
Yeah. For then I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech. That word then is the pivot point of the universe. It marks the transition from decreation to recreation.
It initiates the grand reversal, and the survey spends significant time analyzing the mechanics of this restoration, specifically the concept of the pure lip, or iyahur in Hebrew.
The pure lip, what does that signify?
Well, God promises to give the peoples, and notice the plural there, implying an international gathering, not just Judah, a pure lip, so that they may all call upon the name of the Lord and serve him shoulder to shoulder.
There is a robust scholarly debate about the exact mechanism of this pure lip, isn't there?
Yes, very robust. Some scholars argue it refers to basic moral purity.
Like just not lying anymore.
Right. People simply ceasing to use deceitful or violent language in the marketplace. Others argue it is a linguistic reversal of the Tower of Babel.
Oh, like everyone's speaking the exact same language again.
Proposing a kind of universal language harmonization where the fractures of human communication are healed.
What does Velazquez conclude?
The survey concludes that the most contextually accurate reading is purified worship.
Circling back to the syncretism.
Exactly. Remember the mechanism of syncretism we explored earlier? The Judeans swearing by YHWH and then turning around and swearing by Milcom.
Right, the dual allegiance.
That dual allegiance is the impure lip. The promise of the ear is the removal of the distortion of idolatry.
So it's about who they're talking to, not just the language they use.
Precisely. The divided nations who previously worshipped astral deities and imperial gods will be united in truly, exclusively calling on the name of the Lord. The linguistic unity is a unity of worship, not necessarily a single spoken dialect.
And this restoration completely alters the atmosphere of the book. I mean, think about the progression we've tracked today.
It's been incredibly dark up to this point.
We started with a terrifying cosmic reset button. We had black clouds, military invasion, cosmic uncreation, and blood poured out like dust in the streets. But how does it end?
It ends with light.
It ends with an exuberant, overwhelming divine presence. God is described as being directly in the midst of his people. And he isn't just sitting there stoically handing out pardons from a distance.
He is incredibly active and joyful.
Right. The Hebrew words used are gil and shema. He is actively saving, he is rejoicing, and he is literally audibly singing over his people.
Zephaniah 3.17 says, "He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing."
Wow.
And the shock of this in the ancient Near Eastern context cannot be overstated.
Why is this so shocking?
Well, look at the gods of the surrounding empires. The gods of Assyria and Babylon. They demanded endless labor, tribute, and blood. They did not sing over their worshipers with affection.
They were just tyrants.
Exactly. To place this image of a rejoicing, singing God next to the terrifying violence of chapter 1 is a theological masterpiece.
It circles right back to the courtroom analogy we opened with. You have a stern, terrifying judge who possesses every legal and moral right to drop the hammer of absolute destruction.
Because the guilt is undeniable.
Yeah, the society is demonstrably corrupt, the vulnerable have been exploited, and the covenant has been shattered, but the judge takes off the robes, steps down from the bench, and wraps the defendant in a joyous, tearful embrace.
It's the ultimate subversion of expectations.
It really is. It is the purest expression of grace following the deepest reality of justice.
Which answers the ultimate why of the entire book.
Why the severe, terrifying judgment?
Yes. The survey points out that the judgment motif in Zephaniah was never an end in itself. God does not unleash the day of the Lord simply for the sake of punitive destruction.
He's not just angry to be angry.
No. The judgment was the necessary dark corridor through which restoration had to travel.
The dark corridor.
You cannot have purified, joyful communion with a holy God while simultaneously clinging to systemic injustice, the exploitation of the poor, and the syncretic worship of power.
The corruption has to be dealt with.
The institutional rot had to be completely burned away. The mechanism of judgment clears the ground for the architecture of grace. God's ultimate goal for his people is not mere physical survival of a siege.
It's much deeper than that.
It is purified, ecstatic communion in his presence.
The idea that judgment is a dark corridor leading to restoration is profound. And this ancient dynamic, this specific sequence of sin, judgment, and grace, it doesn't just stay locked in the 7th century BCE.
Not at all. It reverberates forward.
The survey provides an incredible section on how to read Zephaniah today, connecting it to the larger redemptive historical arc.
Because if we look at the macro narrative of the biblical canon, Zephaniah acts as a crucial structural link.
How does it fit into the big picture?
Well, the story moves from the initial promise of universal blessing in Genesis through the strict requirements of covenant holiness detailed in Exodus and Deuteronomy.
The law.
Right. Then you enter the period of the kings and prophets where Judah systematically violates that covenant, effectively pulling the curses of Deuteronomy down upon their own heads.
Which is where Zephaniah steps in.
Yes. Zephaniah exposes that failure universally, showing that human institutions cannot save themselves, but he preserves the remnant.
And for a Christian reading of the text, this redemptive arc points directly forward to the New Testament, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
While Zephaniah doesn't name Jesus directly, the canonical mechanics of fulfillment are incredibly clear.
Exactly. In New Testament theology, Christ is the ultimate figure who bears the full weight and curse of the day of the Lord on the cross.
He takes the cosmic reset upon himself.
Yes. He steps into that dark corridor of judgment as the ultimate sacrifice, absorbing the cosmic violence.
Remember earlier we talked about how Judah became the sacrifice?
Right. Christ takes that place. And the mechanism of that sacrifice is to create the very reality Zephaniah envisioned at the end of his book. A purified international people, a remnant made up of both Jew and Gentile gathered with a pure lip to worship.
Bringing this massive theological framework right down to ground level for you, the listener. How does an ancient warning about the fall of Nineveh or the syncretic worship of Baal apply to us today?
Because it's easy to just dismiss it as ancient history.
Exactly. We aren't bowing to stone statues of Milcom or offering grain to the astral deities on our roofs.
We might not use the ancient names, but the survey translates this text into incredibly sharp modern sociology.
The core human issues are the same.
They are. The mechanisms of idolatry are still profoundly public and structural. Today, our false gods operate under different branding.
Likewise.
The pursuit of unchecked power, the endless cycle of consumerism, political ideologies that demand total allegiance, and the illusion of technological self-sufficiency.
It is that exact "I am secure" mentality we saw in the wealthy merchants of Jerusalem.
The complacency.
Yeah, the complacency of the householders who thought their silver could insulate them from the collapse of their society. It is identical to a modern culture that believes advanced technology, massive wealth accumulation, or dominant political power can insulate us from the moral and ecological consequences of our actions.
We think we can build a high-tech bunker to escape the consequences.
Exactly. We are still deeply tempted to treat God as an absentee landlord while we extract resources from the vulnerable.
And Zephaniah brilliantly marries the concept of social justice with true worship, showing that the two are mechanically inseparable.
You can't have one without the other.
Right. You have the rulers acting like roaring lions, extracting wealth through force, and the priests profaning the sanctuary in the exact same breath.
The system is tied together.
The mechanism of systemic sin links the marketplace directly to the altar.
Mm.
You cannot utilize exploitative labor practices or extract wealth unjustly on a Friday and then show up and offer pure, acceptable worship on a Sunday.
God doesn't buy the compartmentalization.
The prophetic tradition completely rejects it.
It demands total integrity of life.
Mm.
Leadership in any community, whether corporate, political, or religious, must be morally accountable, not merely effective at generating revenue or influence.
Because, again, privilege exponentially increases accountability.
Exactly. That principle applies to modern institutions just as fiercely as it applied to Jerusalem in 622 BCE.
This leads to perhaps the most profound psychological and spiritual insight from the entire Velazquez survey.
What's that?
In our modern context, we are addicted to rushing toward the happy ending.
Oh, absolutely. We hate the uncomfortable part.
We desperately want the singing God. We want the joyful embrace. And we want the promise of restoration, but we want to entirely bypass the cosmic lawsuit.
We want the prize without the process.
Yes. We demand hope without having to face the hard truth of our own complicity.
We want the recreation without the decreation. We want the grace without acknowledging the systemic rot.
And Zephaniah's structure absolutely forbids that shortcut. Hope is not the denial of reality.
It's facing it head on.
Right. Zephaniah teaches us the mechanics of true restoration. We only arrive at the joyful singing after we have told the brutal, unflinching truth about our own corruption and idolatry.
We have to pass through the dark corridor.
True hope requires a ruthless, devastating inventory of our own injustice. You have to pass through that dark corridor of truth to reach the purity of grace.
We have covered immense ground today on this deep dive.
We really have. From the ashes of Nineveh to the singing God.
We started in the physical ashes of Nineveh and the terrified, desperate military outposts of Lachish. We walked through the deeply corrupt streets of late monarchic Jerusalem, analyzing how princes, judges, and priests weaponized their institutions to sell out the covenant.
The roaring lions and evening wolves.
Right. We stood under the terrifying cosmic shadow of the day of the Lord, realizing that all human wealth and political leverage are entirely useless against divine justice. And finally, we tracked how the humble remnant, the Anoim, passed through that dark corridor of judgment to emerge into the breathtaking light of a God who purifies, restores, and exuberantly sings over his people.
It is an absolute theological masterpiece compressed into 3 short, intense chapters.
It really is.
It serves as a permanent reminder that God is deeply holy, that he will never be domesticated by our pragmatic religious routines or political maneuvering, and that his final, ultimate word to those who genuinely seek refuge in him is joy.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final haunting contrast to mull over, drawn directly from the incredible literary artistry of this text.
The 2 silences.
Yes, the contrast between the 2 silences of Zephaniah. In chapter 1, as the terrifying day of the Lord approaches, there is a strict liturgical command for silence.
Be silent before the Lord God.
It is the dreadful hush of exposed guilt. It is the breathless silence of a courtroom right before the ultimate sentence of decreation is handed down.
A terrifying quiet.
But then, in chapter 3, when the remnant has been restored and purified, the text says God will quiet you by his love. Or in some translations, he will rest in his love and quietness.
A completely different kind of silence.
Completely different. The entire canonical journey of Zephaniah is the journey between these 2 profound silences, moving from the terrifying, breathless silence of impending judgment through the storm into the peaceful, secure stillness of perfect acceptance.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
So I want to ask you, which silence is echoing in your life today? Are you frantically trying to build a bunker of wealth, status, and self-sufficiency against the inevitable storms of life, dreading that first exposing silence?
The silence of the courtroom.
Or are you willing to step out of the illusion of control, join the humble remnant, let go of your pride, and find yourself quieted by a love that sings over you? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a privilege. Keep seeking, and we'll see you next time.